Outside, outside, looking at the stars, staring with my mouth wide. I ain't letting nobody stop me this time. With every single level that I reach and I climb, they ask, are you from outside, outside? Everything around me I create with my mind. Working too hard, I don't want no downtime. Put my team on, they gon' shine when I shine. We can take this outside, outside.
Alrighty guys, so let's get started with today's video. Alright, I have so many drones, I'm like, I don't need another drone. When I heard DJI was coming out with a new drone, I said, well, I'm only gonna get it if it has a 1-inch sensor. Now the DJI Air 2S, of course, has a 1-inch sensor. So yes, I am getting the Air 2S, and should you as well? And how does it compare to the Mavic 2 Pro? And what's going on with DJI? All these new drones, does that mean a Mavic 3 is next? All right, we're gonna talk about it in today's video. So let's get right into it. So I'm sure by now you've seen all the specs and you know a lot about the Air 2S. So in this video, I'm not gonna go over all the specs. What I'm gonna go over is some of the features or some things that aren't in other videos, or some of the most important things of choosing, should I upgrade, and is it better than the Mavic 2 Pro? Or is it better than the Mavic Air 2? Okay, should I upgrade from the Mavic Air 2? Or if I already have the Mavic 2 Pro, is this really worth getting? Okay, we're gonna talk about that in today's video. So first, I'm gonna give you two big reasons why if you already have the Mavic 2 Pro, you really don't need the Air 2S. However, there's a lot of reasons why you do, really. But for these two reasons alone, you might want to wait until the Mavic 3, which I do think is going to come out this year, but I'm going to talk about that later in this video. So for me, the biggest upside to the Mavic 2 Pro is having an adjustable aperture that you can change from f2.8 to f11. You can also do that with the Phantom 4 Pro, but you know, that's a big drone, so we're talking about portable drones here. And being able to change that aperture means if you put on an ND filter and it's not quite exactly right, or if the sun changes and you're up there flying and there's clouds and the sun comes out and then it goes away, having that different aperture, you can just adjust that aperture slightly and the video will be properly exposed. However, with this brand new Mavic Air 2S, you can't do that, all right? Because it only has a fixed aperture, f2.8, and that's kind of annoying because you have to put on an ND filter before you take off and fly and get it just right. And with the combo, DJI gives you 4 ND filters, which is nice. It's still kind of annoying because you can't change it once the drone is in the sky. So once it's up there, the only way to change the exposure is by adjusting the shutter speed or the ISO. And being able to adjust the aperture definitely makes it a much more convenient drone and a better drone, but it's not the only factor, that's just one factor, okay? The other thing I really like about the Mavic 2 Pro is just flies really well, all right? The Mavic 2 Pro just has this feel that's hard to describe. Now, I'm not saying the Mavic Air 2 or the new Air 2S don't fly well, and I just ordered the Air 2S, so it's coming. So I can't totally co-sign on that, but I've talked to friends who have flown it and it seems very similar to the Air 2. So the Mavic 2 Pro just flies slightly better. Now, if you're an experienced pilot, it's not gonna make much of a difference, but I feel like this is almost an extension of my brain or extension of my hands when I'm flying. Whereas other DJI drones, it doesn't quite have that really nice feel. Again, from flying a lot, you can pick this up, but it's really hard to describe. The only way I can describe it is that it just moves in the way that I want it to move. It just seems like an extension of my brain. And lastly, the Mavic 2 Pro has just really nice colors straight out of the box. Now I gotta give the Air 2S a shot. I haven't looked at that yet, but just out of the box, the Mavic 2 Pro has just amazing colors. Love the colors on it. It has so many new features, but I'm gonna concentrate on just a couple features that are really the most important to upgrade to this drone and make it better than the Mavic 2 Pro. So number one, right off the bat, is the price. Having a drone that shoots 5.4K, so it's a little higher resolution. This only shoots 4K up to 30 frames per second versus 5.4K is a nice advantage. So the Air 2S having that little more higher resolution is definitely an advantage. And for $999, $1,000, $1,300 for the combo, it's still much cheaper than the Mavic 2 Pro. So I think DJI may lower the price on this. And even if they lowered it, still the price is amazing for what you get from that drone. The next thing I want to talk about with the Air 2S that is an advantage over the Mavic 2 Pro that I haven't really seen out there, and I don't think a lot of people talk about this, but if you take out the batteries from the Mavic 2 Pro, what I've noticed, if you fly in hot weather around 70 to 80 flights, so once your battery reaches about 70 to 80 flights with the Mavic 2 Pro, the battery in really hot weather, if you really push it, it may start to expand, all right? That's happened to me with a couple of my Mavic 2 Pro batteries, whereas that has not happened with the Mavic Air 2 or my other new DJI drones like the Mini 2. I think they did improve the batteries. The battery life is similar. DJI did something with these Mavic 2 Pro batteries, and there's other people out there. I've talked to other people who rent drones, who have drones, who have seen the same thing. So around 70 to 80 charges is when this drone battery starts to expand. And what I end up doing is when the battery expands in really hot weather, I put the drone battery in my Mavic 2 Pro, and then I have to put a rubber band around it, a couple rubber bands, just to make sure if it expands, it doesn't pop out and the drone falls from the sky. So that's really annoying. You either have to get the battery fixed or order new batteries. Whereas with the Air 2S, I don't think that problem exists. With the Mavic Air 2, that doesn't exist. So DJI has definitely improved its battery technology. So I just wanted to point that out. If you have experienced anything like this, leave it in the comments below. Next thing I want to talk about is the size. The Air 2 and the Air 2S, both are the same size. So if you put it next to the Mavic 2 Pro, it is significantly smaller here, okay? All right, you can see the size. There definitely is a size difference. It's not huge, but it's definitely noticeable. And we look at the side by side. All right, and also the weight. So the Mavic 2 Pro weighs about 2 pounds. This weighs about 1.25, 1.3 pounds. So definitely having a lighter drone helps. With that said, I don't really like the Air 2 controller. It's much bigger, and the Air 2S controller is much bigger than the Mavic 2 Pro controller. I'm probably in the minority, but I like having a smaller controller. That's kind of a downside, but overall the drone still is lighter. So having a nice portable light drone is nice to carry around. Another great thing about the Air 2S is the Mavic Air 2 batteries fit with Air 2S. So you can take your old batteries and use them. So if you already have the Mavic Air 2, I think the Air 2S is worth upgrading because you can use the same batteries. So you just put those batteries in, and then if you really want to shoot professionally, the Air 2S is more of a professional drone, whereas the Air 2, it could be professional, but it's just a smaller sensor in low light. It's not really going to perform that well, so I really wouldn't call it a professional tool, but it's borderline. You can still get away with it. But now having both drones, you could always have this drone, the Air 2, as your backup. So I always recommend you have 2 drones, especially if you're doing it professionally, making money doing it. So that's really nice that DJI made the battery compatible, which they usually don't do with drones. This is very rare, so I'm glad that they did it. Now, another huge factor of the Air 2S over the Mavic 2 Pro is the fact that it has O3 transmission. It used to be AcuSync 2.0, AcuSync 3.0, but they don't call it AcuSync 3.0. Okay, DJI is kind of slicing everything off. They're shortening it. So instead of calling it the Mavic Air 2S, they'll just call it the Air 2S. Instead of calling it AcuSync 3.0, they're calling it O3. Now this O3 transmission allows you to go up to 12 kilometers or 7.26 miles. That's crazy, all right? Having that extra transmission, you're never gonna fly that far. Once you go past a mile or a mile and a half, it's really hard to see your drone, so you're gonna break the visual line of sight rule if you do so. However, having that extra transmission is great if you're flying in cities, or if you're flying in the country and you're flying over trees. Sometimes the trees, even if you're nearby, or buildings or signal interference, can shorten that distance dramatically. So having that extra transmission, the O3, is definitely gonna be helpful when you have obstacles, signal interference, and things like this. It's gonna help you, give you better transmission, and having that is just an extra safety feature, I wanna say, and it also gives you a peace of mind. I think that's a huge deal for any drone. Having the drone break up is annoying. And DJI always says, oh, it can fly 12 kilometers, 10 miles, but in actuality, that rarely ever happens, okay? That's an ideal circumstance that you almost will never encounter. But with that said, you only need up to a mile is good. And even if I'm in the city, if it's up to a half mile or even a mile in the city and not getting any interference with a lot of tall buildings and things is really great. Now, if you're an experienced pilot, I think you know what I'm talking about, but if you're new, trust me on this, having that extra transmission is not good for really flying far, but good for flying where there's areas of interference. All right, so having that 1-inch sensor is great. The Mavic 2 Pro had the 1-inch sensor, so nothing different there. However, the Air 2S shoots 4K, but there's something worth noting. The Mavic 2 Pro has a 28-inch wide field of view, but then in HQ mode, it shoots about 40 millimeters. So you have two different 4Ks that you can shoot in, both 28 millimeters and 40 millimeters with the Mavic 2 Pro. Now with the Air 2S, you are able to shoot 22 millimeters wide in 4K, but if you shoot 4K 60 frames per second, it crops in. Okay, so it crops in about 30%, 22 millimeters plus 30% crop in. So to me, that's not a huge deal, but having that 4K 60 frames per second, even if you're cropping in a little bit on the sensor, I think you're still gonna get great image quality, but is it gonna be much better than the Mavic 2 Pro? Probably not, because the Mavic 2 Pro, you can shoot 2.7K at 60 frames per second and it looks great. So to me, that's not a huge deal, but having the 5.4K resolution and then being able to downsample that for videos or just using it, you could even upsample that to about 5.7K or something like that in post-production. That'll look great. Having that little extra resolution does help. And of course, there's so many other features that DJI added. All the new things like Active Track 4.0, Point of Interest, all these different intelligent flight modes they improved with the Air 2S. So for that reason alone, I think it is worth the upgrade if you have an older drone like the Mavic 2 Pro. Now we talk about what's next. The Mavic 3, is that coming out? And I don't know for sure, I don't have any insider knowledge, but just my gut feeling, DJI is sort of taking an approach kind of like Sony cameras. They're coming out with so many new drones that their older drones don't kind of make sense to buy. Like I wouldn't buy the Mavic 2 Pro now. I would not recommend that. I would definitely get the Air 2S over the Mavic 2 Pro. With that said, if you already have the Mavic 2 Pro and don't need a 1-inch sensor drone anytime soon, don't need the things I talked about for the Air 2S, then you could wait. I would say end of summer or fall. So I either think sometime in late August or sometime in November, DJI will come out with the Mavic 3. And what we're gonna see is a drone that's better than the Mavic 2 Pro, better than the Mavic Air 2S. Because the Mavic Air 2S to me is really, if the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic Air 2 got together, had a baby, that's the drone that we see now. For $1,000 and DJI changing all its names now, they're getting rid of the Mavic name. Okay, they're shortening OcuSync to just O3. And now the DJI Fly app has been updated and it's a lot more robust and feels a lot more like the old DJI Go 4 app. They're creating a new lineup, okay, and a new way of marketing. So I think DJI is getting rid of the whole Mavic thing. What will we see next? So my gut feeling is the Mavic 3 will be coming out at some point in the future, and my guess it'll be close to $2,000, you know, with the charging hub and everything, insurance. It'll definitely be 2,000 plus. And it's nice to have all this new technology, and it is a bit of a conundrum, kind of like with Sony cameras. They come out with so many new cameras or now so many new drones. Wait, do I need another new drone or not? I would say yes, if you're a professional, it's worth having 2 drones with a 1-inch sensor. So if you already have the Mavic 2 Pro, it's worth the upgrade to the Air 2S because then it has another 1-inch sensor. Now you got 2 drones with a 1-inch sensor just in case something happens. You got all that new technology in it like I talked about. It also shoots 10-bit log, which is really nice. Now if you have the Mavic Air 2, it's also worth upgrading because like I said, you have that 1-inch sensor and this could be your backup. Still can get the job done in a pinch, but working professionally, I still think the 1-inch sensor is going to be a lot better, especially in low light. All right guys, I don't want to make this video too long. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and before you go, if you haven't done so, so download my free drone gear guide. I put that below this video. And having all this gear is great, but knowing how to use the technology in education, I would say, is more important than the actual gear. That's why I created a free training for DJI drones. You can watch that free training by clicking right up there or in the link below. And in that training, I show you my top 7 secrets for flying DJI drones. I'm Breck Aramella, the Drone Pilot Pro. Don't forget to subscribe so you can get more videos with the Air 2S. And remember, fly like a pro.